Most people think getting fluent is a game of studying as much as possible. But what if I said that actually, the less you do, the more you learn? In this video, I'll share the simple 3-step study method that's helped me learn 5 languages, so you can just copy it and save yourself years of wasted time and effort. But first, you need to understand why most methods fail, so you don't spend time doing the wrong things. You might have been told that to get fluent, you need to study vocab lists, learn grammar rules, listen, read, write, speak, and basically do whatever there is. But trust me, I've tried that, and when I, instead of doing everything, just simplify my routine down to a few core basics at the right times, my progress skyrocketed. And using this simple system, I was even able to learn conversational Italian in just 30 days. So let's start off with stage 1. Here's where most people either quit or stay stuck forever, so it's really important you do the right things to start off. And I like to think of it like building a house. You wouldn't start decorating before you even built up the walls yet. But that's kind of what most people do when they start learning hyper-specific words and trying to speak before even having laid a foundation. So instead of this, I want you to simplify and think, what do I actually need to do anything with the language at all? And you'll find that the answer is probably quite simple. You don't need to just learn the language, whatever that is. You just need to find the highest ROI activities possible and do as much of them as possible. Finding those 20% things that will give you 80% of the results. The way I breezed past this stage in just over a week when learning Italian was by picking 2 resources and just kind of sticking to them. So I picked an audio course called Language Transfer for grammar, but really any guide will do. I used a flashcard app called Anki for learning a few hundred to 1,000 of the most common words. And lastly, I supplemented that with some light immersion on top. It's probably quite a good idea to watch a few YouTube videos or listen to some podcasts just to kind of get an idea of how the language sounds, even in the beginning when you don't understand that much. And whether you want to do that with or without English subtitles, kind of just depends on how big your balls are, I guess. Just keep things very, very simple and try to get to a point where that spoken conversation isn't all gibberish anymore. So once you've done this for a few weeks to a couple months, you're probably ready for stage 2 and you've built a nice little base to work with. Now this stage is usually the one that will actually decide if you're going to become fluent or just be one of those people with a 10-year Duolingo streak who can't even hold a conversation for the life of them. But luckily, it's quite easy to get past if you do the right things, and it's also probably the most fun stage in my opinion. What changed the game here for me was realizing that I couldn't just keep doing the stuff that worked for me at first. I remember starting out learning Spanish, I had quite a lot of success just learning some grammar, vocabulary, and kind of just hopping between apps. But about 2 to 4 months in, I realized I wasn't really making much progress anymore, and I just kept doing the same things anyways. I think this was honestly mostly due to comfort. I just get used to doing the same things over and over again, and I thought that I probably just need to know the grammar rules a little bit better before I start watching some content or speaking with someone. But the reality is that no matter how many stories your house has or how pretty it looks from the outside, it's never going to be functional before you add a couple rooms and some furniture. The truth about studying is that you can learn things that way. But that's exactly what you're doing. Learning. You're not truly internalizing the language, building intuition, and just getting it. So I cut out the formal grammar study, and what do you know? Well, I started picking up the grammar naturally and subconsciously via just seeing the language used correctly. See, after learning the basics, you'll notice that you'll actually start recognizing quite a lot of words and even whole sentences when you watch videos or listen to stuff. And that's how your brain naturally picks up a language. By understanding it and not via memorizing. By understanding messages in it and having a whole lot of context to go with it. That is how you do it. You might think that you wouldn't understand if you try to watch a movie or a YouTube video in the language, and that might be somewhat true. But the thing is, if you don't do this, you might be able to recite the meaning of a word or grammar rule, but it'll always require thought and never come naturally. Plus, the understanding you'll have will be very limited, since you've just kind of seen a definition of it and never seen it used in context. So how we fix this is by practically implementing 3 steps. The first one is picking content that's at the right difficulty level. See, the linguists who advocate for this kind of approach also tend to be very clear that you don't want stuff that's too hard or stuff that's way too easy. What that means practically is you kind of understand the plot and what's trying to be said, but at the same time, there's a lot of unknown words, and you gotta focus to keep up, basically. The second thing is that you gotta pick the right topics. I had a coaching call with a guy who was watching a lot of content, wanting to learn for his job, but the thing is that he was watching all kinds of topics, so he was never really being specific in what his actual goals were. Instead, what I like to do is pick 1 or 2 topics at a time about things that I genuinely enjoy and that I also know that in the future I'm gonna want to be able to talk about. It really doesn't matter if it's fitness, fashion, anime, food, travel, whatever. Just pick 1 or 2 things that you think are important for you and your goals. Then watch those until you can understand them without problems. And then you move on to other topics. That way, you're going to get really good at 1 or 2 topics, and it's actually going to be way easier for you to watch content about that. And once you've gotten good at those, you've probably gotten good at the language as a whole, or at least better, and so you can watch more general topics now as well. And the third part of this little micro method is to start learning vocabulary from the content you watch instead. Because previously, you wanted to just kind of lay the groundworks and learn some basic common words. But now, the goal is actually to understand specific niches and specific topics that you want to talk about. So now, you want to start looking up words that you've seen appear multiple times in a video you're watching or a text you're reading, and add them to a program like Anki, for example, a flashcard program, and then just start noticing them within that program, kind of getting reminded of the definition or the kind of idea behind that word, just so you have an easier time picking it up and understanding it the next time you're watching that kind of video or reading that kind of text. The whole point of stage 2 is expanding on the base you built in stage 1 via context-rich, enjoyable input to make sure that you don't stay stuck a forever beginner. And how you do that is by almost studying nothing, just doing a little bit of vocabulary study, maybe 20% of your learning being that, then 80% of it being input. That's how you truly make a language start clicking for you. And if you want some personalized help doing that, I offer one-on-one coaching, so you can click the first link in the description to see if I can help. That brings us to stage 3. Now, we gotta be really careful here, because only the most serious learners will reach this point, which means that you've done the work. But now it's only up to you to continue doing it to turn this kind of decent into actually fluent. But the problem is that a lot of learners get frustrated here and maybe even end up quitting without even realizing it. You might have noticed that I haven't mentioned speaking yet once, and that's for good reason. I remember people in my old Spanish class tried to speak, and almost every single time it was a complete disaster. Now you might think that that's because, well, they just need to practice speaking more. And that's probably true, it most certainly is true, but they also need to just learn more. Because what people forget is that even though the goal is to speak fluently, you also need to learn first to even have something to say. And that shit takes time. It's not something you get from just reading a few textbooks and downloading an app for a few weeks. So while you could definitely start speaking sooner, it's not going to be super productive. But at this point, you're actually ready for it, and I'd say it's 100% necessary. Now it's finally time to take all the knowledge we've learned and start activating it. Taking that big old house and put some decoration in it. But it's not just about speaking. See, at this point, you want to start watching only native content pretty much, and you probably want to have roughly an equal split between input and output to also continue learning new words. The mistake people make here though is they just start kind of speaking with no plan in mind at all. So ideally, I think starting off in this stage, you want to begin by talking to yourself to kind of make it a little bit less nerve-wracking, and ideally if you could, record it as well. So you can look back at it later and see what kind of mistakes you frequently make. Maybe there are a couple topics that you really struggle to talk about. Then you can go back at it later, maybe next week, and focus on learning even more about those specific topics, or maybe a word you messed up or something you didn't pronounce correctly. After a while of locking yourself in your room and just speaking to yourself like a maniac, I think it's time for you to also start talking with other people and just kind of living your life in the way that you'd use your native language kind of thing. I think doing this too early can be stressful for some people, but here's where you're gonna feel it out yourself. Some people really love speaking with others, and so it would make sense to do it a little bit earlier, but nonetheless, you wanna include both of these in stage 3. At this point, you can make friends, watch TV shows, browse the internet, travel, do whatever you want to really, because you've earned it and you're ready for it now. Your main bottleneck isn't all around knowledge, it's just kind of specific knowledge and knowing how to actually use it and implement it for your life. Keep doing this and you start noticing your personality coming out and things just getting more and more natural over time. But no matter how good your method is, if you're making these 3 mistakes that's on the video right here, you're gonna really struggle. So click on this video, I'll see you guys there, thank you for watching, and until next time, keep learning.